Please welcome Michael Del Castillo, Coindesk, Pascal Bouvier, Santander InnoVentures, Ruby Morales, CME Ventures, Dan Moorhead, Pantera Capital and Bitstamp, James Robinson, RRE Ventures, Matthew Rozak, Block and Tally Capital.
Hello. My name is Michael Del Castillo from Coindesk, the new guy on the block chain. And to my right over here is Pascal Bouvier, venture partner at Santander Ventures. We'll be joined also by Rumi Morales, executive director of CME Ventures. To her right is Dan Moorhead, CEO of Pantera Capital and also at Bitstamp. We are currently missing a Mr. Jim Robinson from RE Ventures, who I think you may all know. And then Matthew Rozak from Block and Tally Capital is at the end over there. Our goal this evening, or this evening, it's been a long week. Our goal today is to get into not only the skill sets of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, but what it takes to found a successful company and the technologies that everyone on the panel today are most excited about. And to give you the big picture overview of what you're about to see, is we're going to be learning everything that we can from the talented panelists in preparation for them joining you in the audience as judges for 5 startup pitches. So we will go immediately from learning from this panel into seeing some young, talented, hardworking entrepreneurs implementing it. So that being said, what I'd like to begin with is a brief overview from all the panelists. When you are listening to that first pitch from that entrepreneur with a good idea, what is it that you're looking for from the entrepreneur herself or himself, whether or not it's from a technological knowledge, understanding, personality, and where those two traits might actually balance out. Pascal, you want to kick us off?
Easy question to start with. Venture investing with early stage companies, to me, is all about people and relating to people and building that relationship. You're going to be in a relationship for sometimes 4, 5, 6 years. So the personality, the authenticity has to shine. Of course, you have to have the subject matter expertise, but over and above that, that passion, that vision, which has to be quite lofty, but as well grounded. And again, that authenticity, right? I want to know that I'm getting in quote-unquote bed and be on the board with and help an entrepreneur that is a real person, not a drone, not a robot, with real ideas that I can interact with. So I would say these are the top level things for me. Whenever over the first 2-3 minutes, I figure out whether I want to work with that person or not.
I guess for me, I think, hello, Jim.
Was this today?
That's Jim.
Sorry, I'm late.
We introduced you before you arrived.
Perfect.
And then we're just talking about the qualities of an entrepreneur that we like to see. For me, if an entrepreneur is as hopeful, visionary, dreaming, the most aspirational realist, that's what I'm actually interested in, is someone who understands that being a startup CEO is not easy, that there is a lot of pain and hardship that goes through running a company. So if you think you just have the greatest idea and build it and they will come and everything is going to be great and you're going to be funded and you're having your IPO, I'm sorry, that's not the type of entrepreneur that I think is going to be successful in the long run. It's someone that understands there's a con to every pro, and that you're going to be willing to push through those cons in order to succeed.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I'd say that we've been looking at the Bitcoin space for 5 years, and we've probably heard it all by now. And there's a really funny website. It's called But with Bitcoin, and it has a random generator of a business, hotel reservations, whatever it is, but with Bitcoin. And that's a pitch we hear a lot, is an idea that has, but with Bitcoin. Our main thing is just trying to think of what is the blockchain doing in this idea, or is that central to it? And I think the other main thing we've latched onto are entrepreneurs who are trying to solve a problem and discovered the blockchain as the best way to solve that problem, rather than kind of the other way around, but with Bitcoin entrepreneurs that are just trying to come up with a Bitcoin startup idea. And so there are people that either, like Elizabeth Rosales, moved to Africa to try and solve some money movement problems in Kenya and found out that Bitcoin is the best way to do it, or moving to the Philippines and founding Coins.ph. Those are the entrepreneurs we get really excited about, people who are trying to solve a problem, and Bitcoin is the right way to solve the problem.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you heard with Pascal and Rumi and Dan. People matter, relationships matter, your authenticity matters, how you present yourself, how you sell, because how you sell to an investor or an employee or a customer or a partner, it's all interrelated. And being nice, being a good person. All great entrepreneurs know how to win friends and influence people, and that's a skill that kind of either you have or you develop over time, but that's a very important trait, and that's kind of magnetic in terms of your pitch, how you inspire employees, how you build your business. So the people kind of dynamic is super important. Another piece is I see a lot of entrepreneurs coming in with a product, and sometimes that product is actually a feature. It's not even a product. And they're like, I really want to build this feature or this product that's going to solve this issue, which is great, but also think about the other concentric circles, and once you solve that, how do you build that staircase of the broader kind of ecosystem that could build off of? And so kind of paint the bigger picture, focus and kind of tie down that one issue, but then paint that picture.
So for us, we've invested in about a dozen companies that are blockchain and Bitcoin focused over the last, call it 3 years. And there are two axes that I use. The first is it in the category of faster, better, cheaper, meaning you're going to do something that already exists in a better, quicker way, maybe a cheaper fashion, or is it something you simply could not do before, kind of a brave new world? Kind of an application. That's the first. And the second is it a first world use case or is it a third world use case? And we've seen all of those across that spectrum, but the entrepreneurs that resonate with us are those that have a lot of clarity on exactly what they're trying to do, what they're trying to target, and have thought through how they're going to win in the markets that they've decided to take on.
Now, thank you all for that answer. It's funny, though, because I can't help but think that you just described someone that scares the heck out of so many of the blockchain coders that are out there. The stereotypical blockchain builder may be a little bit quirky. I think that when we imagine the stereotypical young coder, they perhaps might have ended up behind a computer exploring this whole new world. And well, let's just put it this way. Maybe not the most confident in front of a group. I've personally come across entrepreneurs or thinkers with ideas who don't feel qualified to take that idea to a venture capitalist because their personality doesn't fit that mold. Is there any advice, and I'll just open this up to the panel, that you would have for that brilliant coder out there that isn't comfortable in front of crowds, that isn't comfortable talking in person? How can we grow into the kind of entrepreneur that you're looking to invest in?
So I would have a couple of comments. The first is that's not limited to blockchain for folks like us that sit down with entrepreneurs who often have, because they've got a lot of expertise or knowledge about something or have tried to solve a problem on their own, a great deal of skill in understanding, but maybe not a strong suit of communicating that, articulating that, or fully fleshing it out. And that's actually what our job is to do, is to help them sort of, first of all, for us to listen and understand what they're trying to convey, and understand the larger market ramifications to help steer. And if it's something that we've seen attempted before in terms of what can work, what won't work, I'm not looking for someone who is glib or hyper articulate. I'm looking for somebody that actually has tried to solve a problem, and it's a problem that resonates deeply within them. And I will listen and understand what it is that they're trying to do. That's different than somebody that's very derivative in their approach.
I would add that perfection is the enemy of early stage investing. I don't look. I seek, and when I find them, I'm extremely happy. I see quirky individuals, right, that have ideas that are several deviations from the norm, that have behaviors that are several deviations from the norm, because that's where I think that there's the most potential for growth. So rather than, oh, that person doesn't have this, that, and that, but is actually good at painting in blue shades and doing some coding, I try to look for potential for growth, right? And as much as a parent, not that the VC is a parent, but as much as a parent tries to not screw up their kid, you try to help by not screwing up and at least have that raw material within a team or within an entrepreneur, and then help them grow along. I would view it as more of a dynamic process than as either or, and let's start with something, and if we don't have it, then we don't invest.
So if there is a young entrepreneur out there with the next Ethereum on their computers, but is intimidated by the idea of taking that to the next step, how might they best approach each of you in order to increase the likelihood that they actually get through that door? What are you looking for in that first contact? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a telegram? Are they coming in person and shaking your hand at a conference? What's the best way for an inexperienced entrepreneur to make first contact?
Well, if it's a telegram, that's definitely going to get our attention.
Yes, that's right.
Now watch, we'll get 20 telegrams.
Yes, please send him telegrams.
Everybody's asking, what's a telegram?
If he approaches me and at a conference and says, Pascal, I'm your son, then he's definitely going to get my attention. I mean, definitely. Not sure for exactly what type of end goal. I have my own heuristics, which is I prefer to read a deck first. I'm a visual processor, so I like to read something, digest it, and that's what I tell everyone that pings me, right? Before a 15 to 20 minutes call, or in person or over the phone, send me something that's going to help me digest, and at the same time, it's going to help me figure out exactly how you lay out a specific narrative over what you want to do. I want to see the type of clarity of mind that you have when you put pen to paper. And then I have a call or I have a meeting, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and all the intangibles come out of that, i.e. the authenticity that I mentioned. Is it a real problem? How are they bringing it verbally to me? But for others, it might be a completely different heuristic.
If we could quickly go down the row with this one, what's the best way to make first contact?
Yeah, I respond to everything, whether it's a LinkedIn or carrier pigeons and telegrams or whatnot. The only thing I will say is I actually represent a corporate VC, right? For the CME Group, I lead their venture capital fund. So if you are going to approach me or any other corporate VC, I would say, please do your homework on that corporation. Understand what their pain points are. Many times corporate VCs are investing on behalf of that corporation. So you have to think about the strategic connections that your technology can make beyond just perhaps being a terrific financial investment. So whatever you do, make sure you do your homework beforehand before you approach any VC, and certainly a corporate VC.
It's funny you should ask the question that way. A young entrepreneur just reminded me of the first time we met. In 2013, we had a meeting with maybe 8 or 10 super smart people talking about colored coins, and Adam Back was there and some other people. And one of the guys, right in the middle of the meeting, just got up and bolted out of the room. And afterwards, he published the white paper on Ethereum, and it's Vitalik. And it's such a great moment that, you know, he produced the goods after that and got the white paper out, and that's what gets people's attention. So I would say slick presentations are, you know, not worth very much, and actually shipping something is really what counts.
So he was sitting on the white paper during the talk, and he was inspired to get up in the middle of the talk and publish it?
No, he just...
Got it.
Wanted to check out.
Matt?
I don't think there's any magic way to do it. I think being relentless and going every possible direction you can between a hi, how are you in the conference. This is where I meet all entrepreneurs and relationships that I have in this industry. It's because I show up to these conferences for the last 3 years, and it's made a difference in terms of my perspective on who shows up. You know, now we're at this conference. We have IBM and Microsoft and Deloitte, and the conferences have changed dramatically. But at the same time, new developers, innovation, money continues to gravitate to these conferences. So we're seeing more and more of that. Personal interaction, getting a referral from friends or colleagues, that's always a big improvement on the discussion. But being just relentless and just emailing, calling works actually. So that's a positive trait.
Listen, I think most of what I've heard is falls under the category of good advice. There is no magic bullet. At the end of the day, all of us, I think, try to be as open and receptive as we can be. Now, the reality is that if you get several thousand submissions a year, you need some sort of filtration, some sort of a screen process, and so it is, as Pascal said, generally preferable if we can see something. It can be a well-machined and crafted deck, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a 3-paragrapher. But that allows us to sort of make that first decision of, does this even fit within the guidelines or under the topics or areas of interest that we're focused on? That's A. B, does it compete with one that we're already in? Because if it does directly and it's obvious, then, probably not your best choice. And then, the third truism is that it helps if you can find somebody to make a mutual introduction, although, to Matt's point, at things like conferences and events, obviously that isn't necessary. But it is useful if it's cold.
So I like the idea of as opposed to taking the but for Bitcoin approach to building companies, to follow a first passion and to discover a blockchain or another distributed ledger organically. I think ideally that sounds like a pretty beautiful way to go about founding a company. But for the techies out there who are interested in the technology first, who are blockchain first, and want to build a company that is taking advantage of this revolutionary new technology, what about them? They're not going to necessarily go with that first passion because their first passion is blockchain. So what ideas are getting you most excited right now? What blockchain applications are really jumping out to you so that if someone in the audience's first love is blockchain, they can have perhaps a slightly better likelihood of approaching something that one of you might find interesting?
Well, there's always blockchain for blockchains.
Talk about that, please.
No. I'm kidding with that. But there are some areas that we focused on. So we made a bunch of investments. A lot of those are FinServ, FinTech related, not all. But there are undiscovered countries here in healthcare. I mean, most people in this room in 10 years, whether you know it or not, your entire genomic profile may well be somewhere in the cloud. How do you want that stored? How do you want it accessible? Who permissions it? So there's an area. DRM, digital rights management. Think about the issue with piracy around content, whether it's music or whether it's video or whatever. There's an area ripe for a solution, and there are both better and worse solutions in that. So there are multiple areas beyond just financial technology that, at least we think have great potential by using blockchain topologies. And in some of those, you'll want a token that's incentivized, and in others, you won't need that. But there are many, many verticals beyond. And I would say pretty much anything that is a regulated business is probably a likely candidate.
Any specific ideas that are getting anyone's attention out there?
I only focus on financial services and fintech, so I'll stay within this realm. Supply chain finance, I think, is an area of strong interest and would be for like the top 20 banks that focus on that industry, as well as corporates. Just because the physical supply chain is quite optimal or has been optimized over the past 10, 15 years, but the financial supply chain that supports the physical supply chain is in dire need of, I think blockchain applications are, a fairly good solution to alleviate some of the pains. So supply chain finance. The second is the insurance industry. If you think that fintech as applied to either banking or lending or capital markets is huge, then multiply that by 100 and you'll kind of get to the realm of what insurance is from a global perspective. So anything that has to do with claims management, anything that has to do with retrocession and settlement on the reinsurance side, the back end of the value chain of insurance, I think are particularly interesting. And then finally, a third point, which bleeds outside of financial services, but has so many applications because of AML and KYC issues via various jurisdictions for large enterprises, is identity management. The first startup that cracks that, what I would call the trust graph for identity management, is going to be by order of magnitudes much, much bigger than Facebook for the social graph and Google for the search graph, or Amazon for the marketplace graph. So these three things I think are very interesting.
So this is me it's not seeing me just personally speaking, so bear with me here. So Prince died, and he has this whole archive of music, and no one knows who owns his estate. He had no will. He apparently has 80 years worth of music to distribute. I'm thinking this is just begging to be blockchain, right? Prince on the blockchain.
I love that idea.
That's what I would personally like to see. But otherwise, as you imagine, and I stated this before, with the CME, and I'm sure it's with Santander, it's similar as well. We're looking for commercial use cases for the technologies that we invest in. So many times, we know our business so well, but we could be looking at it too closely. If you're coming to us from the outside and say, wow, CME, you're trading all of these asset classes, whether it's gold or oil or, interest rate swaps and so on and so forth, or you have a clearinghouse, right? That trusted central counterparty that blockchain is now saying this could render obsolete. Come and challenge us with your ideas. Show how your startup is going to help us continue to grow. I mean, we've been around for 170 years, and it's because we innovate too. But we always need external ideas, so please come to us. If you look at our markets, you look at our business, and if you have a technology that you think can assist.
What about putting Prince's will on the blockchain? What about smart contracts that kick in after we die? Are there any specific plays that are incredibly imaginative that maybe even a week ago you wouldn't have thought of that has recently crossed your path? Maybe even here at this conference, is there something that jumps out to you, a tool, an idea for a smart contract, an idea for a new language or a way to write or a way to build that's really out there on the fringes?
Well, I think one important use of the blockchain is luxury goods authentication.
Okay.
It's a $1 trillion market, massive counterfeit, fraud issues. The secondary market's very illiquid because 80% of the luxury goods on eBay are fake, so nobody wants to do that. And there's a company called Chronicle in San Francisco that's putting RFID tags onto luxury goods. And you've seen frauds like Nobler & Co. sold $80 million of impressionist art that was fake, all the way down to fake watches that are counterfeit wine. And they looked at the entire spectrum of all those use cases and realized it's the collectible sneakers market that would be the first thing. So it's kids that are certainly mobile first that trade these things, and Nike has it geared so it's just like an IPO. It's issued, always trades up 200 or 300%, and about half of the stock changes hands in the first 7 days. So those are, I think, cool applications, non-financial, all the way down to sneakers.
Any others? Any last other out there?
I think given what you're seeing at these conferences and some of these innovations, whether it's prints or sneakers, these enterprise blockchains, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Hyperledger, all these chains, what we're going to see over the horizon is a constellation of chains, digital tokens. And so this notion of a wallet, which will tether to Pascal's point about identity, is going to be a very, very important component of your experience with blockchains, with your assets, with your identity, and will behave like the browser to the blockchain. So I think the wallet, 2.0, 3.0 in this ecosystem is going to be a very important piece of technology that will ultimately be your kind of control center for how you run your life. It'll have smart contracts that you could develop. You'll have tokens. When you die, it'll turn upside down and automatically disperse your assets to whoever. So I think it's going to be a very important piece of furniture in the blockchain room.
So I'd like to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about how important the business model is to your decision to make an investment. I think that we've seen, for better or for worse, some pretty fabulous examples of companies that didn't start turning a profit until they were years or even a decade old, but were revenue positive. And we've seen other companies that weren't even generating revenue, but had such a loyal following that their investors just kept putting more and more money in. At this phase of blockchain, is it important to you that your potential investment, or the entrepreneur that you're potentially investing in, has a solid business plan? If not, at what point does that become important, and what role do you play as the investor in helping facilitate that process?
I would answer a different question.
Okay. Please.
I think there are many different business models out there. It's very difficult to say one is like so much better than the other in a dynamic way to figure out your mortality rate or your success rate. What I would say is try to, like any entrepreneur, try to think about your business and figure out whether it is capital intensive or not. And try to tweak your business and your idea towards not being capital intensive and resilient over the longer term. I believe that we're, especially now as we're past probably a certain arc and a certain hype of like companies and startups through various rounds raising astronomical dollar amounts that they then have to sustain and spend the money and show traction and so on and so forth. It can be a defeating game. Just that building that resilience over being thrifty and knowing that true innovation does not necessarily take a lot of capital. Actually, you have plenty of use cases, plenty of examples through large companies that ended up being very successful, that started with very little money and didn't need a lot of money going forward. So I'm probably more attracted to that, have been in the past, and will continue to do so in the future, because that also brings to me that person is really disciplined, knows that there's no free lunch, there's no free capital, and so on and so forth. And it again, I use that word now for the third time. Building that resilience is, I think, very, very important.
So at what point do you ask the question, how do you make money? Is that a first meeting or a 10th meeting or a 100th meeting?
I think you ask the question in the first one to see how they answer the question and how they've thought about what the thought process is. But to me, there are a couple of different kinds of investments. There are those where you can sort of on the scale of knowable, unknowable, know with pretty good detail what the likely margins will be. If you're going to apply a blockchain topology into a trading system, you're in the better, faster, cheaper category, and we already have a pretty good sense of what people are willing to pay at the various friction points along the line. If you're, to use your example, putting prints online, well, we can surmise, we can look at music in the past and other things, but frankly, if I invested in a company that were trying to do that, I would certainly ask the question up front. But I'm not looking, there's no right answer. There are better and worse answers. And if one of the worst answers would be, here's exactly what we're going to make in year 4, right? I mean, that's sort of an undiscovered country. We don't really know how that might go. So there, we're willing to build and to try and to fail and to try again. Whereas if it's something like a trading system, yeah, we know pretty much from the beginning, how many marbles are on the table, and you're.
And yet those forecasts seem to appear in almost every pitch that I see.
Right.
Is that something that, how would the panel react to that? Are you turned off by the idea of a forecast, or is that something that you want your potential investment to have considered?
From an entertainment point of view, or from a what exactly is the question?
I'm surprised to hear you say that. To me, it's kind of it is so established. I see it in pretty much every pitch deck that I look at. There's a forecast. What am I going to make in 5 years? What am I going to make in 10 years? How am I going to make it? What is my growth rate? Just because it's I'm surprised to hear you say that. I'm curious if should we not be including forecast numbers in our pitch decks, or is that something that we find valuable?
There's a lose-lose proposition. If you don't include it, I'm going to ask for it, and as you include it, I'm going to shoot for it.
Fair enough.
But suspending the joke, I'm much more interested in an operational forecast over the next 12 months. Exactly what you are going to do, how you are going to use the resources that are available to you, and looking at numbers from a metrics and operational point of view, as opposed to just like a purely financial point of view, which I think is again for like a seed round, an A and sometimes a B after the B at the kind of pivots. You're much more in the operational detail as you're in the financial detail. As long as you've looked at the vision, the big picture, it's a big opportunity. You do a back of the envelope calculation of the market, how it could be, how the margins develop, and so on and so forth. Then directionally, you kind of know that you're in the right place. But I bet there's a limit to that crystal ball that sits on my desk.
When you talk about you'd like to take a look at the metrics for a company that hasn't launched and may not have any users yet, where might be some sources for that data that you would find particularly reliable, or just what makes for a good forecast in that sense? Looking at just the 12-month area there. As opposed to just blind optimism, where I'm going to grow at this rate and I have no foundation in reality.
Yeah, I don't want to hog the time here, but I think that you have a lot of like internally driven metrics of, it will take so many man hours to develop this MVP. It will take various steps there to get to level B. There's a sales cycle, there's a business development cycle. So helping an entrepreneur figuring out over and above just like coding, exactly how that code is going to materialize into a team, how that team is going to materialize into getting initial traction, again from an operational point of view with like trading partners. I think that's where you have to focus on, because you're building a skeleton, and then you have the sinew, and then you have the muscles, and you're trying to figure out the various growth rates to make sure that that animal that you're building is not doomed from a Darwinian point of view. So it's very organic.
Are there any investments in this young industry that you wish you had gotten in on earlier, or that you would like to get on in the future? Start with Dan in the middle there.
Well,
any regrets?
Oh no, there's definitely a lot of great deals that we passed on that would have been good to do. But it's an observation in this that blockchain is so fascinating, so interesting, that all the questions are always like, what's the coolest, edgiest case? And I throw out Chronicle because they have these cool 3D printed RFID tags they build into Marshawn shoes and stuff, and people can relate to it. But I think the thing that's actually working is cross-border money movement, and that is it's born. It's kind of like. Peter Thiel said, we wanted flying cars, and all we got is 140 characters. It's kind of like we wanted IoT, Bitcoin things that are super cool, but just real-time wires. It's kind of boring, but it's where the growth is really happening. And it's the actual pain point, because in the developed world, as Jim said, there's a big gap between the developing world and the developed world. In the developed world, our credit cards, there's no pain. You swipe it and you get 1% cash back. It's great. So there is pain when I have to wire $300 from here to London. And that's a bunch of the companies that we're invested in now are addressing that. I think it's boring, but it's a huge pain point.
Any regrets before we go on to the next point?
Well, you had the question for us, like, what do we look for when an entrepreneur approaches us?
Yes.
I think a common denominator of fear here is like, what am I missing? What email did I not respond to? What's the entrepreneur kind of in the back corner of this room that says, I want to talk to somebody here? We have that primal fear that we're missing a particular deal that's, listen, we're on the front end of this ecosystem. I think Pascal's point on capital efficiency makes all the sense in the world. But we're on the front end of something that's similar to like railroads or telephony or internet, and we're kind of months into the game of seeing IBMs and Deloittes coming into this ecosystem, but we're going to see a ton more. We're going to see an incredible amount of capital being invested in this space because that's what it requires. It requires a lot of capital, a lot of people to create the innovations that we're all thinking about, and so. We're just thinking through what the anatomy of a blockchain is, what identity models look like, and it's going to take some time and a ton of money to do that. So there is money in this room, outside of this room. More money will be coming in, and so entrepreneurs, I think, are positioned in the best room possible to develop blockchain.
For me, sometimes it's not what have I missed, but what have I not yet seen that I still want to see? And for us, at least at CME Ventures, we're very much investing in fundamental technologies that we think have a wide range of applications across industries, certainly to the financial services industry, but you have more applications, that's great. But when I look at what's happening in this space, I tend to think that there's lots of specialization that's already starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit concerned that broader industry adoption has not yet happened, while the startups are going to take this niche or that niche. And I'm still waiting to see, are there still more groundbreaking technologies or ideas at that base level that have not yet appeared yet that we could perhaps build applications on top of?
So the next big idea isn't a niche, shiny, fun toy, but another big picture breakthrough that has yet to happen yet.
Possible.
Well, I think it's a little bit of how you define it. Are we in the database industry 3.0? Meaning we're going to build several sort of middleware type companies. Some of those will get picked off by the incumbents. Others, maybe a couple of cases, get large enough and have the metrics to go public in a market where there are IPOs. That is one series of outcomes. And then there's a lot of feature sets that get developed. Are we in the internet of value, right, where we're going to do a lot of things that we couldn't do before that we'll be able to do in the next 12, 24, 36 months? I would argue if it's the latter, you've got many IPOs and many outcomes. But it's way too early in this gestation period to know or to really have regrets. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, and I think a bunch of us would be able to sit here and say, yeah, send me in, coach, I know what to do now. Beam me back a couple of years. But even those that seem like they're breakaways, the shifting sands, things can move very, very quickly. And so I don't know that there are a bunch of interesting things. I'm not an open bazaar. That's interesting to me. They're doing some very compelling things, I think. I'm not in Coinbase. I have some indirect exposure to it. So there are a couple that seem like they've got lots of momentum. But shifting sands, it's still early, and check back in a couple of years.
I'm glad you mentioned Coinbase, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is the barrier that has been put up between the concept of a Bitcoin company and a blockchain company. Are you looking to invest in what would have been traditionally called a Bitcoin company, or are you now looking at more new applications of blockchain technology in what we are in the media and I think elsewhere referring to as blockchain companies? Or to rephrase that question, are we past the time of investing in Bitcoin companies and looking at other applications, or are there still big moves to be made in the Bitcoin industry?
I think there are. We actively look at both. I continue to believe in both. I think the use cases vary greatly. There are many use cases where whether it's Bitcoin or if we're another one to rise, and even though that seems hard to do, you never say never, where you want to have a decentralized on the front end, not just the back end and an immutable structure in the blockchain, wrote once, can't modify, but on the front end of how does the data get in the first place. There are going to be many applications, possibly many of them consumer, where you actually want to have some sort of a value token system and a decentralized mining stack that is in fact, making the decisions as to what gets written to begin with. In other systems, and bank systems, and many others that are enterprise related, you may not need any of that incremental value. But I also think that there are many use cases where you want tokens of value, including, and in particular, in second and third world environments where you've got, almost no access to financial services.
What about you, Matt? I think we're running out of time. Invest in Bitcoin companies still, or are we onto the blockchain era?
I think they're all inextricably linked, and right now there's obviously a network effect around Bitcoin. There's the other dynamic on Bitcoin and blockchain that I think the theme that will continue to get more and more profound is security. And so the Bitcoin blockchain is the most secure. And so if you fast forward this movie, how do these other blockchains play into a secure, decentralized database that people could kind of be interdependent on? And so I think Bitcoin is still matters. I think somebody in the last year hired a PR firm to say blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. And if you're hearing a lot about blockchain lately, well, there's a reason for that. People are trying to innovate on this new railroad, but there's lots of railroads. The Bitcoin railroad's not going away, still alive and well, and continues to grow.
Mm-hmm. Dan, want to take a stab at that? You interested? Is the distinction artificial? I make it in my writing all the time. I know that I'm not the only one. Are we mistaken in distinguishing between a Bitcoin company and a blockchain company? And if not, where are we in that as far as the investment curve is concerned?
Yeah, I guess my only advice for the entrepreneurs is to not be religious about which brand their blockchain is. Bitcoin's been the best blockchain for 6 years. There are other blockchains that have potential advantages, and to be agnostic with your company to build to whichever rail works the best. We have the largest Bitcoin fund, so we're big believers in Bitcoin as an investment, but we're invested in Ripple Labs, Zcash, and lots of companies that use Ethereum. So, you just have to be open-minded.
I would, if we have time, I would take the counterpoint to that. I actually don't believe that there will be wide use cases going forward with the Bitcoin rails and the Bitcoin blockchain, because I'm hard-pressed to visualize and understand that with the current limitations that Bitcoin technology has, it can address a world that is inevitably going towards more richness of data, right? And more richness of data means that you need to have a platform that is able to code very complex and deep and specialized contracts, smart contracts. I mean, it's got smart contracts that neither smart nor contracts, but they represent something. It's basically a code for like a specific process that is going to happen on either a consensus ledger or a blockchain. So from that perspective, which I think is a secular, long-term way of how we are architecting ourselves around data as a new asset class, I don't see Bitcoin being central and part of that. I see specific usages around maybe payments and more simple usages over maybe like payments and more simple usages over maybe like a core. But to think that there's going to be, after what Ethereum has ushered, to think that Bitcoin can play that at that same level as at Ethereum or whatever is going to come next to Ethereum is probably a pie in the sky dream.
Rumi, last words? That didn't sound right.
I would say if you love Bitcoin, do Bitcoin. Right? If you love blockchain, do blockchain. Don't change your company for us. You're building your company for you. And you're not going to be a successful entrepreneur unless you're doing what you love. So
that's a fabulous last word there. So I believe we are on to the next phase.